Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your patience. We had lots more people coming in the door, and then we just had a few formatting issues on our cards that were in the cameras, and we needed to get that right because we're recording today, and we want to make sure that it goes up on the website in its entirety. We've started a little bit late, so being honoring time, we will go to the same amount of time after 9 o'clock. The meeting is scheduled till 9 o'clock. But since we're 20 minutes after, we'll go till 20 minutes after 9. My name is Janet Eagleson. I am the manager of Public Affairs and External Relations for the town of Caledon. I thank you so much for coming today. We're going to go straight into the land acknowledgement. Indigenous peoples have unique and enduring relationships with the land. Indigenous peoples have lived on and cared for this land throughout the ages. We acknowledge this, and we recognize the significance of the land on which we gather and call home. We acknowledge the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and Haudenosaunee peoples, and the Anishinaabe of the Williams Treaties. This land is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We honor and respect Indigenous heritage and the long-lasting history of the land, and strive to protect the land, water, plants, and animals that have inhabited this land for the generations yet to come. So this is a public information meeting. I'm going to ask council, but not name them, to wave their hand right now. They're sitting separately in the room. Members of council, could you wave? Let people know where you're sitting. Thank you so much for coming. Members of council are actually formally sitting apart tonight, and I'm going to explain why. This is not a decision-making meeting. There is no position for them to have a conversation and talk about anything that could influence a decision. So we've deliberately moved them and separated them apart. Could I get the senior management team to wave their hands? So I'm not going to introduce them either, other than two people who are going to be speaking, because we want to get moving. Fellow sitting in the front row, in the hot seat over here, is Eric Lusick. He is our Commissioner of Planning. And Robert Cummings, where's Robert? Robert's over here. He is our Commissioner of Finance, and he has a piece with respect to some of the financial pieces that are attached to the bylaws. And I'm going to get this off my chest right at the beginning and acknowledge to the room, after saying thank you for coming today, that we blew it at the public meeting. We didn't give you what you wanted. We did not provide detailed information. We didn't provide it at the right time of the night, and that was wrong. And I apologize for that on behalf of everyone who participated. The reason why we're doing this format the way we are is because we're trying to listen and not just tell. And we heard you on a whole bunch of questions. A lot of questions are along the same theme from that public information session. Sorry, that public meeting, different format. We also had consultants speak on behalf of the town. So you're going to get staff tonight, and only staff. There are no consultants in the room. We didn't tell them not to come. We just didn't bother inviting them because you asked to hear from it from us. So that's why the format of this is different. This is the first of 4 two-hour meetings to share information and gather questions. And I've said it to a couple of people already, but I'll say it to everyone. What we want to be is a listening organization, not a telling organization. So to hear the details of the issues that you have and you want to bring forward, we did hear a lot of them, but there are more. As we give the information, there's an opportunity to digest and then get those questions to us. And then we're going to post them on the website as well. The video is going to go on the web. That way, anybody who couldn't come tonight can actually hear the same thing and not hear it interpreted through my lens or someone else's lens. If they want to sit through the whole tape, they can. It's going to be long. There's a lot of detail. That is another thing that we heard. So on the screen, you can see the level of detail that we are going to be addressing tonight. Right off the hop, the 4 big questions that came from the public meeting and the elephant in the room, which is strong mayor powers. I am going to talk about very briefly at a high level at the beginning to address those questions. Then the meat is going to come after that. The sections up here, I'm not going to read them out because Eric is going to bring those forward and bring the details, including more detail on strong mayor powers with respect to what the legislation says, so that everyone has the same level of information, doesn't have to go searching for it. So with that, Lynn, could you put the next slide up for me? The next one. So these are the big four questions that we heard that Thursday night. And I say that Thursday night because for those of you who sat until 2 a.m., that's pretty heroic on your part, to be honest. Yeah, because I fell asleep at 1:11, and I'm sorry, and I had to wake up and go home. So you did great. Why now? And what about the 2031 targets in Caledon's pledge? So, and for those of you who are taking notes, just so you know, this presentation, it's also going to go up on the web. So we'll put that up so that you have access to all of the pages, but please take notes as you would like. The second one is, who are the developers? So we didn't bring that out. Councillor Kiernan asked for it and then shared some of those, and thank you to her for doing that. So we're going to put the full list up here so that you can see all of them and have all of the details. The other one, which I have heard over and over again, is why did you hide the letters from Peel and Minister Calandra? So we're going to talk about those letters and talk about the information in the letters and address this stuff head on. The fourth one, does Loopstra Nixon, LLP, or the lawyer, I'm going to use air quotes, does the lawyer have a conflict? So head on, we're going to address that. And like I said, the elephant in the room, strong mayor powers. So Lynn, could you flip to the very first one? So right off the top, the housing pledge, to the question, one of the questions on the floor, has it disappeared? No. The housing pledge of 13,000 starts by 2031 still stands. We made that pledge. Council made that pledge. We are working toward that. That's 7 years away. And there's another date that matters. That is in, you can see here, I won't go through the specific details, but on the first 3 years, you can see the actual numbers of the number of starts that have to come. You know we got a $2.8 million check from the ministry. That's because we exceeded the 80% mark on year one. That's how the check came. That was a month and a half ago, I guess. And it's an incentive that comes with the Building Homes Faster Act. There's another date, and that's 2051. By 2051, Caledon must grow under the provincial direction by 220,000 people to a total of 300. What that means for the number of starts is probably above 65,000 in order for us to meet that target by the time 2051 rolls around. That's a big number. So in the official plan, the designated urbanized area has been set out. That was endorsed by council. So we know where the primary area of that is going to take place. More than 65,000 homes is 27 years. If we move at the rate that we are working towards our pledge, it will take us 35 to get to the number that the province has laid out for us. So, to the answer or to the question, why now? Getting moving and taking a proactive approach to go forward, to work towards and achieving that date and achieving that number is the reason why we are moving forward. Lynn, could you flip to the next page for me? We know that nothing happens overnight. So the average home start takes well over a decade. That's from the time the papers go in to the time where anyone who has had a home has gotten the key. That's a long time. If there's an apartment building involved, it takes longer. I don't know the exact number, how much longer. It does. There's more paperwork and there's more financing. It's a bigger construction. So, of the 12 parcels on the boards at the back, Some of those are close. They have the paperwork already submitted. Some of those will help us to achieve 2031. Some of them are designed to help move toward 2051. Being proactive and getting rolling is what's going to get Caledon the things that Caledon has said they want. Infrastructure, green standards, parks, schools. At the end of the day, the bottom line is that we can guide and decide Caledon's future, not someone else. Next slide, please. These are the developers. The ones on the left are the 7 who have already submitted paperwork and have projects already rolling. The ones on the right, the 5, have been in meetings with us, and we know that the paperwork is imminent. So they've already had the preliminary meeting with town planning staff, and we're getting rolling. Now, I know there are a lot of people in the room who recognize the names here, and I can see by the faces that there's some very visceral reactions to the names that are here. So there's a couple of things around the parcels themselves that I want to just share with you related to this. All the parcels, as I said before, are in that urban boundary area. And somebody pointed out the problems with the maps. They're hard to understand because there's no legend. And so we're going to take that back. One of the maps, when it was presented to you in the meeting, had an error on it. We used, pardon me? Solmar is on A8 and A11. I'm sorry? These are we pulled them out of the database. These are the ones that are the actual numbers with the parcels. So we'll take a look at that and get you the answer, but this is the information that was pulled today. So these are the names, just to make sure that everything was current. The old file did affect one of the maps. That was for, I don't have the number, but we used an older data file that had the original 413 on it, and they're now working at a 50% map, and we didn't apply that on. So there was an error in that map, and that has been corrected. The material piece, I think, around this is that the developer is not the landowner. And sometimes there's confusion with that. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they do own the land. Many cases, they act on behalf of landowners. So for these 12 parcels that are on the boards, the numbers that you see up here, there are 260 landowners in this group. The smallest number is 1. The largest number is 67. I don't know which number goes with which one, but there are 67 with 1. Landowners range from a developer to maybe it's a farmer, maybe it's your elderly neighbor. That's how diverse those are. Those names are available through the Land Registry Office. I'm not going to go through them here because that would probably take us another 2 hours. Lynn, would you, next slide for me? So the letters from Minister Calandra and the Region of Peel. So getting letters, soliciting comment, getting input, getting technical considerations and considerations both for and against things is a standard part of planning. So we look for agencies, a wide number of them. It's the ministry, many ministries in fact, the region, Credit Valley Conservation, TRCA, large groups to submit comments. The letters came in, they were provided to planning to go through a commenting process. The next slide is actually going to show you what our process looks like and how we deal with it. The standard approach when we get comments is to have planning and the professional planning experts take a look at it. I don't know what they mean in their separation and in isolation, no more than anyone else does who isn't a professional planner. So those are taken and addressed one by one and considered. There's often lots of back and forth. So we read them, we evaluate them, And then we go back to the submitter to see if they are going to be okay, or it meets some of their needs. If it doesn't, then we come back and we work together to resolve that. What I can tell you is that 95% of the items that were submitted with Minister Calandra's letter and the Region Appeal letter have already been resolved. Can you flip to the next one for me? Now, this is a big room. The printing on this is small. So I'm going to read it directly so that you will know what is in each of these columns. So we do something and create a comments response matrix. It looks exactly like what you see here. So our planning team goes through, puts every comment into the matrix, and then creates the response to it. So I'm going to read you what is in the comment that the column that says region comments. This one. So the example is related to area A1 to A9 and A11. The region's comment says exactly. The region advises that small areas in areas A4, A5, and 11 related to the proposed route of Highway 413 are identified as being outside the 2051 new urban area boundary. So the team has gone through, and the response from the town, which is in the next column to the right. Alignment issues of the regional urban boundary with 1, the original Highway 413 preferred route, and 2, the new boundary from the 50% design prepared by MTO. The intent was to map and zone up to the most up-to-date planned ROW for the 413. Is that right of way? So I learned a new acronym today, just like the rest of us. So for the 413, with the holding provision in place in all the bylaws for that lands within the focused analysis area, comma, clearance must be granted from the Ministry of Transportation with regards to the GTA West Corridor / Highway 413 alignment. ZBAs for areas A4, A5, and A11 have corrected the boundaries of the lands in the new urban area. So we do this for every comment. We're doing it for every comment that's in the letter from Minister Calandra and everyone from the region in the same way that we're doing it for the TRCA, the CVC, stakeholders, landowners who submit. We go through the process. The next column to your right says, is comment addressed as part of the updated zoning bylaw? The answer to that one is yes. The next column says, is comment to be addressed through related planning applications? In this case, that particular one is not applicable. So that's the standard process that has always been done with planning exercise in terms of soliciting, obtaining, and then addressing and responding to comments that have come. So the region's letter and Minister Calandra's letter are comments into the process. Did they sound bad? You bet. So when you view them one at a time, they absolutely do. In their entirety, not one agency has more power than the other. Sometimes they have bigger voices, but everything has to be addressed appropriately. And that's the process that's going through so that when the revised bylaws come back, all of these pieces must be addressed before that. Lynn, would you flip it to the next one, please? So let's talk perceived legal conflict. So Loopstra-Nixon is our lawyer. Quinton Anibal is the lawyer. Sorry, Loopstra-Nixon is the firm. Quinto Anibal is the lawyer. So we had 2 lawyers in the meeting on Thursday night. They were representatives from Loopstra-Nixon. And when the question was asked with respect to, is there a conflict, they provided an answer. And I'm pretty sure everybody who was there knows the response of the people in the room, because nobody believed it. So what I'm going to, the bullet points are, and I'll just share them with you. Loopstra-Nixon covers a lot of ground when it comes to the field of land use planning and development law. They work for many different types of clients. They work for municipalities, they work for developers, they work for public interest groups, sometimes they work for landowners. The sector works almost universally the same way. When you hire a lawyer, They're working in these spaces. The Ontario Law Society dictates that their license is going to be tied to whether or not they declare, after they've processed the available information, whether or not they have a past conflict, a current one, or a perceived one, plus a bunch of other things if you go on the Law Society's pages. So, Mr. Anibal has gone through that process. Loopstra-Nixon has gone through that process. And they have provided information to us that indicates that they have complied with the Ontario Law Society's regulations around conflict of interest, and that declaration satisfies the town of Caledon. I can tell you that Loopstra-Nixon, in terms of their mix of clients, has represented over 60 different municipalities in the province of Ontario and fewer than 20 developers. I don't have those names because I'm not privy to them. Client privilege has that information. So yes, there has been media coverage in different points of time around associations, but if there is clearance from the Ontario Law Society and the lawyers have gone up and looked at those pieces, that is, like all professionals who have standards, what they must do in order to be able to present themselves and evaluate risk and conflict. Could you flip the next, sorry? Yeah, we didn't hide them. We put them in the process and gave so they're, yeah, she can't, yeah, so I'll repeat the question. So the point of clarification is, why didn't council get the letters? And then when there's a statement on the letters that says, please make them public, why weren't they at a public meeting? Why weren't they then brought forward at the public meeting? So comments into a process are not public information. So they are not, so anyone can, and I appreciate the shakes of head, and I know we've had an agreement that you said we're never going to agree, and so that's okay. There is no requirement for us to, when there's a statement on it that says, please make them public, they're part of a process already. I go back to the piece where I said, I don't have the ability in that isolation to address a letter that has information in it because I don't have professional planning expertise. In isolation, I would look at the letters and go, ooh, there's a lot in there that doesn't sound very good. There's a lot of letters and there's a lot of comments. That's right, and councillors don't typically get information or comments from a planning process because they aren't part of the planning department and the professional staff. I'm gonna leave it at this point just because we're getting a lot of time, and I appreciate that you're providing this, so we'll take that feedback, but we've got some time constraints in order for us to get through.
Excuse me, Jen, I can't report questions.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna hold that for right now. Absolutely. So we're just going to go through, just so that Eric gets a chance to get you through the details that were asked. So the strong mayor powers from an overview perspective. So 46 municipalities were granted strong mayor powers in order to be able to meet the super aggressive targets that are in Bill 23. All 46 are competing simultaneously for housing starts to achieve the overall provincial target. Everybody wants to get developers to build here. It is just what is going on. This is open source data that's available online. The most current piece of information is March the 7th. 43 of 46 of the municipalities that have gotten strong mayor powers have used them. As of that same date, there were 637 decisions that were issued using this power. Rezoning applications or rezoning using strong mayor powers have happened elsewhere. So one of the pieces was, this is brand new, it's never happened before. There are 3 situations and examples that I put up here, and I'll give you the details on what happened, or at least a high level. There's Ajax, Mississauga, and Belleville. So in Ajax, there was a strong mayor's power was used to rezone 4 to 60-story towers that will have 1,274 rental units. nothing for sale. In Mississauga, you've probably heard the news, it's the fourplex decision that they made, that council had made a decision on, and then the previous mayor used strong mayor powers in order to enact that for the development within their city limits. Belleville is a rezoning, these are I've got it written down, but the classifications, I don't know what these mean exactly, but you'll see the transition. The rezoning is from highway residential fourth density and open space to highway commercial zone with special provisions. There was nothing in the information that indicated what special provisions meant. But those are 3 examples of how strong mayor powers have already been used since they've been invoked from the province, or given from the province, in order to be able to move rezoning forward. At this point, I am going to turn it over to Eric so that he can walk you through, there's a lot of information, and so the details we did not provide on that Thursday night are what are included in the information that he has. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Lusick, so I'm the Commissioner of Planning and Economic Development here at the town of Caledon. I'm going to take you through, Janet referred to it as the meat. We'll see what you guys feel about that. I'm remarkably less exciting than Janet is as a planner, so hopefully I'll keep you awake. So first up, I want to get into Caledon's growth context. So perfect. So Caledon is an important stake in provincial efforts to shape and accelerate housing development. So Janet referred to a bunch of this earlier on in terms of the growth needs or otherwise. So if you look at Caledon, we're one of the largest lower tier municipalities in the greater Golden Horseshoe, if not, in fact, the largest by geographic area. We are also, or we're stated to be, if not already, one of the fastest growing municipalities in Canada. We are both a large and fast growing municipality according to the provincial policy statement from the province. Population projections, so in 2021, we anticipate that we had approximately 81,000 people here in Caledon. By 2051, we're looking at 300,000, if not more. So the Provincial Bill 23 provides Caledon with more autonomy in land use planning, and the region's official plan will be taken on by the town. Next slide. Here's a good example of the number of bills that have come forward in the last 5 years that really started to identify how transitioning of growth would be transferred either from the province to the municipality or from higher level regions to the municipality. So you can see there's a lot that's happened. I'm not going to go through each one of them. So when it comes to things like growth forecasting, so how you forecast growth, there's a number of things that come into play, whether it's population or immigration or otherwise. There's internal births and deaths, things like that, that all come into this. What happens is we've identified growth, and I brought the numbers up in the previous slide. Currently, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has forecast these larger numbers, and they delegate or distribute the population to the different municipalities. So currently, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing forecast is based on population projections, land availability, market trends, and servicing. Proposed, Ministry of Finance has a 25-year growth projection based on assumptions about birth, deaths, immigration, migration, much as I was chatting about. And municipalities may continue to forecast growth using population and employment forecasts previously issued by the province. What this is all saying is we are growing fast. Next slide. So the new Bill 185, which was identified in the list, will impact how growth is phased. There's proposed legislation that is there for servicing allocation bylaws and using this use it or lose it idea. So it's really trying to direct growth to occur and really encourage it to respond to the ultimate needs. So things that come into play are things like water and sewage capacity and how it will be allocated and withdrawn. Later in the presentation, we'll show what the region appeal is identifying in terms of sewage capacity and water capacity. So planning approvals could lapse if you do not build under this use it or lose it legislation. So beyond that, alternative capital financing policies are also in play where the private sector could fund front-end the cost of new capital projects that help support growth. So a lot of what we're getting to is municipal readiness. So this is critical. This is a lot of the reason why we're here today and having discussions is that we need to respond to growth. There is a time period, we're talking 2051, where, and Janet alluded to this, where it takes time to actually get through a process and actually get something built such that you're providing a unit for people to reside in. So while Caledon represents a small but rapidly growing municipality, we are faced with the challenge of vastly scaling approval processes, development, enabling infrastructure that will help meet these population pressures. As urbanization accelerates, municipal readiness is important for the continued economic and social development of the province as a whole. Next slide. Perfect. Recognition for municipalities is, this is something that's really important. So municipal innovation is absolutely critical. So when I say this, we're talking about things like innovation. We're talking about levels of ambition that the municipality has, policy choices that we're making, and performance that we expect to occur. So there are both structural and lasting reforms that will be part of this. So things that we're looking for are things like permitting process adjustments that will help speed up through the process. Ending things like exclusionary zoning. This is often viewed as single detached homes or otherwise. As of right zoning is something where you're providing the development rights and you're enabling growth to occur. You're not having to necessarily go through big processes that take time. And this altogether, this helps speed up the production of housing. And ultimately, looking at proactively changing zoning rules like is being discussed today. Next slide. So it's not just about housing. This is one thing to point out is that, well, much of the discussion has been about housing and the number of population that we need to respond to. Part of this is also, creating the communities by which people will live. So this is what we often refer to as complete communities. So it's putting development and density near priority development areas, so higher order transit in particular, supporting the introduction of transit in Caledon, supporting new development adjacent to these existing built-up areas, optimizing the existing infrastructure we have, and this has a big impact on the amount of taxes and costs for development, prolonging agricultural uses as long as they are feasible as well. Next slide. Here's the exciting planning process in front of you. There's different routes that you can proceed through, often with applications or otherwise. Highlighted in yellow is where this mayoral decision lies. Kind of gives you an idea where in the process it would typically fall. What I really want to highlight here is all the work that still has to happen. So even though we're talking about rezoning applications, there are still things like secondary plans and OP amendments for a lot of the applications. There's plans of subdivision. There's optional tracks that you can go through after that process, whether it be through site plans and then to building permits and then housing construction, or building permits to housing construction. And this comes down to how you enable growth or development or otherwise. Next slide. This is a general discussion slide about how development is incremental. So with housing inventory units are under review, you have things like official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, draft plans of subdivision, site plans, official plan amendments that are also appealed, and zoning bylaw amendments that are also appealed. So that's one side of it. And then we have housing inventory, so units that are approved but not built. So things like, these are the draft plans of subdivisions that are draft approved but not registered. Draft plans of subdivisions that are draft approved but repealed. Draft plans of subdivision that are registered but not built, and site plans approved but not built. The idea with showing you this is the complexities that come with the world of planning and how what is often thought about planning isn't as clear as it is. And so this is, we're trying to educate and show how this process works. So we're not trying to hide things. There's still planning process to proceed. Next slide. So when we focus on things like targets and reporting, so if you look at the image on the right, so it's housing planned for, housing approved, and housing starts. What we're ultimately trying to get to is the housing starts. You can plan and you can approve a lot. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the growth that you're trying to achieve. You often have to approve more than you otherwise need to ensure that it gets built, because there are time lags. It depends on landowners that don't necessarily want to build, because the municipality itself is not doing the construction. What we're doing is we're enabling development, we're enabling growth to occur so that we can meet the needs. So the province requires the town to report on housing progress on a quarterly basis. Actual performance in 2023 was 778 units, which is actually only 82% of the required starts under what we're supposed to be doing. So we're not meeting our targets now. Part of this can be part of the economy, part of it can be whether you can get workers to do the work or otherwise, but we need growth and we need to adjust it and provide that opportunity. There's around 3,000 units approved in Caledon but not built because they're either appealed or they're building in smaller increments. And so all municipalities have high numbers of units that have not started. This is not something specific to Caledon. And again, it comes to, sometimes it's external factors, but otherwise, sometimes it's because there's enabling that still needs to happen. Jumping on to Part C. So what are the strong mayor powers? So typically, what we would say here is they describe a variety of different powers under the Municipal Act. Many are variations or extensions of existing powers. So the strong mayor powers include the ability to appoint the municipality's chief administrative officer, hire certain municipal division heads, create, assign functions, and appoint chairs of committees, bring forward matters for council consideration related to provincial priority, propose and vote on municipal bylaws which could potentially advance a prescribed provincial priority, veto certain bylaws if which could potentially interfere with a provincial priority, direct staff to do certain things related to their additional powers and duties, propose and veto a municipal budget. So these are just a listing of what are available under strong mayor powers. Next slide. So the legal authority for strong mayor powers is vested in the Municipal Act as the governing legislation. In 2022, the provincial government enacted Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act, which details the so-called strong mayor powers, which may be exercised by mayors or prescribed municipalities under Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act. Ontario Regulation 530/22 specifies that the town of Caledon is a prescribed municipality, so it's one of the ones that have been given the power. The mayor of Caledon is therefore permitted to exercise the powers previously detailed under Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act. That's the legal speak. Next slide. So how is a zoning bylaw approved under the strong mayor powers? Where the mayor believes a zoning bylaw may advance a provincial priority, they may propose the bylaw for consideration by council. From a legal perspective, a zoning bylaw proposed by the mayor must undergo all of the same statutory requirements under the Planning Act as any other zoning bylaw proposed by the town. This includes requirements such as holding a statutory public meeting. Next slide. So the key here is there is no circumventing of the planning process. It is subject to the same criteria as any other zoning bylaw. This process does not affect the requirements of the Planning Act, only affects the process governing how the zoning bylaw may be brought forward before council under the Municipal Act. If the mayor proposes a bylaw and requires a vote on the same under Section 284(11.1) of the Municipal Act, the vote will take place with a reduced approval threshold, whereby more than 1/3 of council must vote in favor in order for the bylaw to pass. Next slide. So there was some discussion about whether municipal zoning orders or strong mayor bylaws are the same thing or otherwise. This table lays out the differences. So if you look at the key considerations are in the left column, municipal zoning orders are in the center column, and strong mayor zoning bylaws are in the far right column. So I'm going to run through each quickly. So under appeal rights, municipal zoning orders are not subject to appeal. Under the strong mayor bylaw, they are subject to the appeal rules under the Planning Act. With respect to public consultation and notice, there is no notice or consultation required prior to issuance under the municipal zoning orders. Under strong mayor bylaws, they are subject to the requirements in the Planning Act, which includes the requirement for a public meeting. With respect to applicability of policy documents, they may not, under the municipal zoning order, they may not be subject to policy documents. Strong mayor zoning bylaws must comply with applicable policy documents. With respect to relevance of the Planning Act, Municipal zoning orders are not subject to regular procedures in the Planning Act. Strong mayor zoning bylaws must comply with the provisions of the Planning Act. We're going to leave questions until the end. We can come back to the slide. Again, we're trying to keep this within a time period. We also have other municipal staff available here, whether the legal or otherwise. If you're talking about a legal question, I'd probably refer to some others. So under Part D, so application areas. So we're talking about official plan designations here. This is a logical extension of the current built-up area. It provides for the completion of existing urban area. It supports the early establishment of the Caledon GO station. It offers existing Ontario Land Tribunal approvals, such as ROPA 30 and minister's zoning orders. So these are all things that fall in the areas. Next slide. This is a slide. Now, this is our draft growth management and phasing plan. So when you came before we're doing this through our official plan, we identified this draft growth management and phasing plan. This is still under our responsibilities coming out of the official plan. We hope to wrap this up in the summer, but really it identifies how we plan to provide growth in the municipality. And you can see from the map, most of the growth is centered south of Highway 413. So this is the planning for beyond 2031. It's a pledge. Most areas are either within the draft phase 1, which is 2026 to 2036, or within settlement areas already established. And then 2 are from the draft phase from 2036 to 2051. So through the official plan, you're seeing is that these lands were already identified for growth. Next slide. So past planning in these areas. There was the discussion about whether planning had occurred or whether this was brand new, and Janet got into a little of this by identifying some of the developers that are part of the planning. This slide shows effectively we've walked through where planning has already occurred. So we have the South Albion Bolton study. So this is the A12 application where it was initiated in 2004. There were public meetings in 2009 and 2014 and council meetings in 2016. The BRES study for options 1, 2, and 3. So this one relates to applications A6, A12, A8, A3, with the initiation in 2012. Public meetings in June 2013, and then council-approved preferred expansion in 2014. Mayfield West, which includes applications with A2, A4, and A9, which is Phase 2, 2008. So there was OMB decisions in 2015 and then again in 2021. And then you have the Municipal Zoning Order 171/21, Option 3, and this related to application A6. So this is the Caledon Station, POPA 2021, and the public meetings were in November 2021, January 2022, and May 2023. Council meetings, there was MZO approval, so not a council meeting, but March 5th, 2021, and POPA is ongoing. Next slide, all right. So here's the 12 areas. So and within this, you can see whether, what is ongoing already in terms of applications. So for A1, there's secondary plan, rezoning, and subdivision applications through the park process. Through A2, we have secondary plan, rezoning, and subdivision. A3, there's secondary plan, public meetings. A4, secondary plan amendments, public meetings, rezonings, subdivision. A5, secondary plan preliminary discussions. A6, secondary plan public meetings in November 2021, January 2023, May 2023, and then rezoning and subdivision in 2022. Let's get us through the presentation and then questions can come. I am running through the planning process, and please allow. Where's Janet? Well, I apologize if you feel it's an insult. We're running through. There are boards as well at the back. We're going to get to some of the plans. I'm laying out the background because these were some of the questions that had been raised and directed us, suggesting that there wasn't clarity with provided. So it was suggested otherwise that planning application work had not already been taken. Sorry, and one of the issues, again, with questions coming here is we are filming today. People on the camera cannot hear questions in the audience this way. So we're going to proceed through the presentation. I don't have to go through each of these. I can leave this. We will continue then. So when we jump now to Region of Peel official plan designations, there were 9 applications. The 2051 new urban areas identify new designated greenfield areas to accommodate growth to 2051. 3 applications through the urban system consist of lands within the regional urban boundary and includes designated greenfield areas and employment areas. Next slide. And then we have the official plan, the future Caledon designations. Now, the official plan was recently approved by council, still subject to regional approval. And on here, it identifies new community areas and existing urban areas. So you can see, now you probably cannot see because of the size of the graphic, but this effectively what impacts most of the area. Next slide. So future Caledon in the official plan identifies these new community areas, the urban center, primary major transit station areas, existing urban areas, potential urban centers. It also identifies designated greenfield areas, delineated built-up areas. One of the changes you're starting to see through some of the zoning work is the mixed-use zoning is starting to be implemented, or it's proposed. Mixed-use zoning is really a flexible and innovative approach to urban planning that breaks away from the conventional separation of land uses. What it does, it integrates various uses and promotes walkability and density. It creates more vibrant, sustainable, age-friendly, and inclusive communities. And secondary planning, subdivision plans, design guidelines, all to be used to ensure compatibility and a harmony of uses. Here's an idea of the 12 areas and the densities that are proposed. So you can see in the orange is the existing density, in the mid-blue is official plan density requirement, and in the pink, strong mayor zoning area proposed density. So you can see there's density, and then if you run along it, you can see there's the 12 areas as they've been laid out. I'm not going to get into each of them. A10 is the community in Bolton. It's the one with the high density. So that's why it definitely looks like a more dense. Next slide. I'm not sure this graphic got adjusted or not. Housing mix within the areas you can see with the different colors. So in the, you see, and so on the x-axis you have the communities A1 through A12 as well as the official plan. On the y-axis you have the percentage of each of the different zones. And so orange we're talking about single and semi-detached units. Yellow is townhouses, and green is apartments. I'll let this stay up there just for a moment. It's a lot to take in. Next slide. Apart from growth in terms of housing or other employment structures, part of the things that come with development or otherwise are community infrastructure. So we have neighborhood parks and amenity areas proposed. In terms of the number, we're looking at about 50. In terms of community parks, we're looking at 3. In terms of elementary and high schools, 16 new. And then 3 additional fire stations. So this at present is an estimate based on draft plans, and the number of size of amenities are finalized through the secondary plans and subdivision plans. So these numbers could change, but it just demonstrates the amount of new community infrastructure that's coming through the development. That's just a graphic image. I'm not going to speak to whether it could or couldn't look like that under design parameters, but in setback requirements. Next slide. One of the key things about development and ensuring for is affordable housing. So if you look along the bottom, it's the typical housing continuum that sort of states the different levels of housing viewed across society. So zoning for affordable housing, often called inclusionary zoning, is only legislated in certain areas. Permissions are across the mixed-use residential zones for non-market housing, multiplexes, and additional residential units. There will be conveyance of land or units for affordable housing, which will be agreed upon through the secondary planning and subdivision stages. There's different terms for affordable, there's different terms for attainable, there's CMHC requirements. I understand there's subsidized or otherwise, but we're not going to get into that debate right now. This is when we get to the secondary planning and subdivision stage, and at those meetings, you can come out. I'm not going to engage with back and forth. Next slide, please. We're going to keep going. Questions at the end, please. So there's many tools to create complete communities. So we're dealing with official plan policies, community structure plans, secondary plan policies, tertiary plans, plans of subdivision, site plans, town-wide design guidelines, community design guidelines, and green development standards. These are the things that we use to ensure that communities grow. Caledon is going to be changing. Growth is changing the way things are done, and part of that is financially based, and part of that is just modern understanding of what works or what doesn't from municipalities. Next slide. Perfect, thank you. This gives you an idea of the amount of background work that the town has already been up to. We have comprehensive plans for a number of different things, and these are the things that guide how we provide community infrastructure or otherwise. So we have comprehensive plans for parks and recreation. We have a fire location strategy. We have a comprehensive plan for the libraries. There's an operational service plan, transit service strategy, OBC rail trail feasibilities, official plan, growth management and phasing plan, though in draft, will be coming soon. Development charges study and development fees review, comprehensive plans for economic development, and then a corporate strategic plan. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So the community structure plan for future Caledon. So a lot of those things that I discussed already, you know, you're not going to be able to read this map right here, so I encourage you to take a look at the presentation later on, but it identifies where a lot of this community infrastructure will go in the future. So it identifies community defining elements such as centers and corridors, natural features and areas, the conceptual collector road network, and existing and planned parks, community facilities, including fire stations and active trails. Next slide. This gets you an idea. You're not going to be able to read this. This is planning for transportation, and transportation impact studies are required at all stages of approvals. So what it really shows is the different things that you look for as part of transportation impact studies, and then the different types of processes and where they're required. So this is some of the complex planning that some of my team have to work through. Next slide. I will emphasize again, secondary planning is still part of the process. The planning does not end when council makes a decision. So some of the things that are involved here, so I'm not going to get through them all, but you know, there's supporting studies that go into things. So there's so many here. I'll read them quickly. Okay, I'll keep moving. There's different opinions. Not everybody knows about the planning, and that is clear from the questions that we receive. I'm not going to engage in debate. I'm going to keep moving. I'm happy to have questions afterwards to come up and chat with me. This is a presentation for the community, and not everybody has as much information as others do. Not as many people understand. Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. I can state with my professional planning opinion that this is. No. Anyways, we will keep going. So I'm not going to read through this, but we're going to keep moving along. So here's an idea of the draft plan of subdivision applications and the process by which each one has to flow through. So you have preliminary meetings, so these are the pre-application review committee meeting. And then you have the pre-consultation meeting, so these are the development application review team meetings. And within each, there are a number of elements that each applicant is required to proceed through. Then there's a formal application, and then following that, there's registration. Under site plan applications, these are the process that a site plan application has to proceed through. So again, this is the park process and the DART process. Next slide. So getting into Part E. So now we're talking about the review of the bylaws under the mayoral direction. As per standard processes, bylaws were circulated for review to the regional appeal, provincial ministries, utility agencies, conservation authorities, and others. As per standard process, feedback from the review is consolidated and resolved in a comprehensive manner. Janet walked us through this a little earlier. I just wanted to reemphasize it again because there's questions about what is being shared or not. My team takes their technical skills built from years in education and takes feedback from different groups, consolidates it. You'll have opinions or otherwise that will be different. It's up to planning staff to provide a professional planning opinion on how to proceed when there's two conflicting opinions. Updated bylaws and comment response sheet will be shared with the report of the council. And so Janet showed earlier an example of how that would proceed. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little about holding provisions. So the Planning Act allows for holding symbols to be used in zoning bylaws when council approves them. These are typically what you call an H, and that's what's held above a zoning bylaw. The holding symbol specifies how the land, buildings, or structures can be used at some time in the future. It restricts development on lands until certain conditions included in the zoning bylaw are satisfied. Zoning bylaws are not enforced until all hold conditions have been satisfied. I want to repeat that. They are not enforced until all hold conditions have been satisfied. So all 12 of the proposed bylaws are subject to a hold symbol. This is about identifying how we are moving, and we're going to get to this. It's one of those ones coming up. So to remove an H, or a holding provision, an H will usually have conditions attached to it which must be satisfied before the H can be lifted from the property. A property owner must apply for the removal of an H once conditions are met. The town must then provide notice of the intention to remove the H by publishing the notice and providing mailed notice to landowners in the vicinity. Council needs to approve a holding removal bylaw. Next slide. Holding conditions added to bylaws A1 through A9 and then A11 to A12. So a secondary plan must be completed under these conditions. Land uses, transportation, housing, transportation's there twice, infrastructure, heritage, and environmental resources and other elements. A draft plan of subdivision or site plan control must be approved. Detailed design of the site is required. A development agreement with the region must be undertaken, which includes water and sanitary sewer capacity to service the lands. And the submission of an environmental impact study must be required, which will ultimately confirm the extent of environmental features. Next slide. With respect to bylaw A10, a secondary plan must be completed. This will set out the long-term planning vision and develop policies related to land uses, transportation, housing, infrastructure, heritage, and environmental resources, and other elements. A noise mitigation report must be submitted for this one as well. With respect to the discussion on the 413, holding conditions for Highway 413 focused area analysis area, the FAA, and the NWGTA transmission corridor, which is the transmission lines, which has a narrowed area of interest within the same area. So the minister indicates that the FAA and the NAI must be protected. Meeting with ministry staff on May 13th, 2024 occurred where staff discussed this with the ministry staff. And so they will be providing their feedback. We provide an approach to proceed, and they're going to get back to us shortly. The proposed updating holding symbol H will be added in 6 bylaws. H would be removed by council once town receives clearance letters from the Ministry of Transportation and Ministry of Energy that both ministries are satisfied with the alignment. Briefly touching through A1 through A12, a lot of these were covered, but they were covered late within the planning meeting that was held on April 25th. This is your high-level map that shows where each of the communities falls. You will find it on the left of the boards over here, at the left of the, sorry, my left, your right. of the hall. And then we jump in now to planned water infrastructure. This is where the Region of Peel is providing us with their advice in terms of how infrastructure will be provided and how it can be provided to allow for the development to occur, running through 2041. So this is water infrastructure in particular, and I recognize you're not going to be able to read the details on a map. This kind of thing does not work well in presentation. And then we have planned wastewater infrastructure through to 2041, also from the Region of Peel. So I'm going to quickly fly through these. And again, we have boards at the back if you want to take a more detailed look. So we have the different areas, zoning areas, A1. I'm not going to run through each because we'll keep it moving. A2. A3. Okay, sorry, I'm pushing mine and hopefully Lynn's keeping up. A4. A5. That's why I'm rushing through them. A6. A7. A8. A9. A10. A10 has 2 boards just because of the detail. Draft as of April 25th. I will note, and it was alluded to a little earlier, on the mapping there were some errors. So we've used the same boards that were provided for the April 25th meeting. Some of staff have already been in the process of correcting some of the areas where there was some bleeding of property boundaries or otherwise, plus there's been some changes to the mapping as well. All of this will be rectified before we head back to council. A11, we already there. A12. And then we're going to jump into part F. So here's a lot of the why. So why are we doing this? Caledon is signaling its readiness for growth. So it's prioritizing our growth for region the utilities so they know how to invest in infrastructure and direct that growth. You can't just provide pipes or otherwise or pumping facilities quickly. They need direction, they need to understand timelines or otherwise. This also provides confidence to the business community of what we're looking to do, how we see Caledon growing. It makes Caledon viable to receive additional funding from other levels of government, whether that be provincial or federal. It provides certainty to the housing providers and our partners. It supports master planning, and it ultimately, one of the big ones is it supports investment in transit. If we're going to get things like the GO train, we need to see growth, we need to see development happening, or otherwise. Thankfully, we have some recent transit changes here in the municipality. Hopefully, we can continue that going forward to help support the population that's coming. Here's an example of some of the townwide transit network as identified for 2051. I'll leave it up here for a moment. No, it's showing it's more the eastern extents. Here, next slide. Here's an example of A10 and how it fits into the larger planned area around Bolton. Some of this is zoning, whether it's enabled or it's identified through the official plan for growth proceeding in the future associated with the GO train station. That's a great question. We'll get to that. So next slide. So again, we talked about housing and providing housing. There's also employment growth that we need to respond to. Part of the provincial mandate is that we have to provide jobs as well. So it's attracting a mix of business sectors to create high-quality jobs for residents, which is a key priority for the town and critical to Caledon's livability. Caledon is set to grow from 32,000 jobs to 125,000 jobs in 2051. The town is actively working to attract new companies to Caledon that match the strengths of the community, working with partners like the province to market Caledon as a destination for investment. In addition to attracting new companies, the town is working with existing Caledon businesses to help them stay and grow in the community and remove barriers to create new jobs. Next slide. This is where I turn it over to our Commissioner of Finance. I'll let him introduce himself. Do you need my laptop? I'll just leave it. Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Lushik. My name is Robert Cummings. I am the Commissioner of Finance at the town of Caledon, and I want to walk you through a couple finance slides here that support the development. So if you're not familiar with development charges was an act that came out in '97 under the premise that growth pays for growth, meaning it protects the existing taxpayer from their funds going into new growth, and exacts a charge on developers and people building in the area to accommodate new infrastructure in the area. So for example, as new subdivisions go in, you may need new roads. Your public will hit a critical mass where you start needing parks and libraries. This is what development charges funds going forward. It's all laid out in the Act. We've recently gone through an update to ours just recently, and the bylaw will be taking effect at the end of the month. Based on the new numbers that are coming through in terms of the charges, we separate it by singles and semis, different sized apartments and townhouses, and then there's a non-residential component as well. Based on the units coming in over the next 10 years of 17,500, and the non-residential portion in square meters, we're looking at over $1 billion in infrastructure funds coming in. So that's charges that get charged out to the developer as they put in new housing, new subdivisions, new areas of plan. This money comes in at different parts of the planning process, but most likely at the building permit stage, and the money is set aside to help build that infrastructure to support the new residents of the area. That's not to be said that the existing residents cannot benefit. There's certainly a portion within the DC Act that supports that, and of course this is only segregated until the funds are expended on new infrastructure. If we extrapolate this out to 2041 and the 35,000 units, it's about a $2.65 billion amount, which is a lot of infrastructure to build in a short period of time. Oh, if you extrapolate this out to 2041, it's $2.65 billion in development charges coming in that will be directly invested into new infrastructure to support the growth in the planning applications coming forward. I'm sorry, we're going to take questions after. I like the question though. Please keep that in mind as we go forward here. So that being said, that the growth pays for growth, once the growth is in, we look at the revenue forecast from the taxation. So that new growth generates $145 million in annual taxation. Very simple math. We're not taking into consideration any tax rate increases, any inflation here. This is just as of today's rates and the change in volume of the number of residents paying taxes. So you can see we have a portion there from residential and our portion from non-res. Again, extrapolating that out to 2041, we're almost at $200 million a year in taxation for our local services. Now the taxation for this from the new residents, in theory, goes to support the maintenance and replacement of that new infrastructure going forward. As much as we don't pool it into separate buckets like that, because we are one large community, that is the theory of new growth paying for new growth, and the eventual replacement and ongoing maintenance of that new infrastructure being paid for. So the Municipal Act supports the taxation, and of course the Development Charges Act supports the growth, and these are just two of the finance mechanisms in place to help exact the development going forward. And this is what we rely on in order to bring growth into the community and protect our existing taxpayers going forward with that new growth. and continue to supply valued infrastructure, parks, libraries, fire protection by law enforcement, and of course, a very large road system and transportation system within that. We are. The expenditures are all included in our development charges background study that's currently on our website. Shows $2.2 billion in infrastructure to be built out over the next 10 years in all areas. The numbers I am showing you is just over the bylaw zoning areas right now. So yes, the capital projects that are to go into place will all be covered now and into the future. I'm going to pass this over for next steps. Janet?
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, everyone. So I'm going to explain the next format, the format of the remainder of the meeting. So as I said from the beginning, we started late, so we are going to allow for extension of the meeting to 9:20 if we need it. What we were doing was at the beginning collecting questions, so it's kind of chicken scratch, but I have some questions that we're going to be able to address when we get through this. Then questions from the crowd. We have a person, Allie, you want to wave your hand? Allie's going to have a microphone to be able to give you the mic and then be able to ask the question. For asking questions, I ask that you keep the time of the question under 2 minutes in order to allow as many questions to come forward as possible. That way, everyone can have a voice and the question can be answered. The reason, just 1 second for... The reason why we have these on cards and we got them at the beginning is that a question asked by one person, and the list that I have here that have come in either by phone or via, have your say, Caledon, if one person has the question, then everyone deserves the answer, not just the person. So that's how we're going to go. I am going to basically now ask these questions that have already been brought together of the experts that we have in the room, and when we get through them, I think they're going to be fairly quick, even though they appear to be numerous, and then we're going to be able to move in to the next piece. Sorry, did you have a question with...
Technical question. Are you going to announce who submitted that question? Because, or are they all anonymous?
So the question is, am I going to be naming who submitted the question and providing it, or are they all anonymous? So none of the questions have the names on it, so they may be people who've already left for the ones who are here. I don't know, there are a couple of people who handed me cards. They may not want me to tell their names even if I had them. These have the ability to submit anonymously online, so I can't tell you who they were from. If you can ask one and then allow others to come up, and if you have time at the end to be able to ask another question, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to start with, let me see here. And there were a couple of points of clarification that I saw in the presentation that I want to make sure because there was a point that someone asked around the density on that bar graph, around the density of the particular one that was fully, was really big in terms of the increased number of density on that. So there was another question that I saw related to that, and it was on that chart, Eric, and I don't know, it's going to be hard, Lynn, I think it was around the 30s. So on the bottom of those lines, there was an amount that was related to the official plan. And there was a number on the bottom, and then this new bylaw was going to increase the density, my apologies. 3 of them, I noted, did not have notations from the original official, or the official plan as to what their density was supposed to be. Putting you on the spot, Eric, but why was there nothing on there? Why weren't they part of the official plan? And I think Bindu's probably going to pull it up in front of you so you can see it, and then name the slide if you wouldn't mind so that Lynn can put it up. But it seemed like something there that was worth noting because it felt like it was missing.
Yeah, hello. It was slide 40. with the densities proposed. Yeah. Yes. So A10 and A12, both sites are one is within a potential major transit station area that allows and requires higher density. It's a smaller site with more units, that's why its density is looking so high. Why A9, A10, and A12 don't have any density requirements is because they're situated within existing settlements. So there is no required density in the official plan for those areas.
Okay, and I'm going to introduce Bindu Shah, who is our advisor in planning and a real brain in this stuff. So that was who just answered the question for us. So that was the question around why there wasn't any blue. I guess it's blue-green on the bottom of those three that have the pink. And then there were two pieces from the presentation that I think warrant just a quick answer. There were only 11 of 12 of these parcels need an environmental impact studies. A10 does not. Why?
Hi.
Sorry, could you introduce yourself so the room knows you?
I'm Carmen Cruz, I'm Manager of Development in the Planning Department. So A10 does not need an environmental study because it's already within an urban context. It's right in the middle of Bolton, right close to the industrial area. So there's no environmental features of any significance in that area. Whereas in the greenfields, there's a lot of environmental features that we need to consider.
Thank you, Carmen. And I guess maybe you can answer this one because it's a little bit the same. The flip side is there's only one of the parcels indicating that needs a noise mitigation study. The 11 others don't. So why is that?
So at some point, probably in all those applications, we'll be asking for a noise mitigation study or a noise study. For A10, one is not required, again, because it's within an urban context. And there are some there's areas that emit noise surrounding it, and it's intended to be developed for residential, and we need to understand the impacts of that noise on the residential development.
Okay, thank you. So this is tied to getting decent transit in Caledon, and I think I'll turn it to you, Eric, or someone. How many people need to live in Caledon before we get decent transit?
I'm looking at my team, and everybody's looking away. There are densities that often provide, like Metrolinx or otherwise, will provide, certain levels of or types of transit service. People often ask, why can't we have subway, as an example? And the densities are very high to justify something like subway. And then there's different types of, there's other types of transportation too. So there's things like light rail transit, which then has a slightly lower density than subway, and bus rapid transit, which then goes lower, and then you have heavy rail as well. So the densities vary depending on the type of transit. I can't speak specifically to the densities that Metrolinx uses or requires, but they tend to be quite urban or otherwise. So if you look at an example, like a not too far local example in Vaughan City Centre, where they have a subway, and you look at a lot of the development density you see there to justify the provision of a subway. Hopefully that answers the question. It's not really quite known, but it's a lot. Oh,
Okay.
Bindu might offer a little here.
No, I just wanted to add to that we do have the numbers for A10, and what we have learned through our review is that the density that is being proposed there is supportive of higher order transit infrastructure, which is like the GO rail. So that is our higher order transit infrastructure.
Okay. Let me see here, okay, so we have a question, and it says, how do you prevent the one road in, one road out issue like we see in Valleywood, which is to our west? And this rezoning feels a little bit like we could end up something like that. How do we prevent that kind of thing from happening in any of these zones?
So the rezoning being proposed for such large areas would not take into account details like that. They would be looked at through the various transportation studies that we listed on those slides, through secondary planning, subdivision planning, and site planning.
So based on that, the secondary planning, which is coming, would address
Secondary
that to
planning.
prevent the issue that we see in
Yes.
Valleywood?
Yes. At the time, the layout of the collector arterial roads will be finalized, and then further details like accesses are finalized at subdivision and site plans.
Subdivision and site plan. Okay, perfect, thank you. So there was a comment with respect to what is really affordable. We have, in our community here, we have one seniors rental building. It's up Kennedy Road if you've gone north. Will there actually be rentals in any of these spaces? Or sorry, in any of these parcels?
So all of the parcels have mixed-use zoning, which allows a variety of housing options. We are not zoning by tenure because that's not prevalent in Ontario. However, in all of these zones, we are permitting as of right all kinds of non-market housing, which is housing that is built by nonprofit organizations, Region of Peel, supportive housing, emergency shelters and such, affordable rental too. And so that will be allowed as of right. And we are allowing for additional residential units, which is relatively affordable rental solution, if I may say so. We are also allowing multiplexes, which are currently deemed to be slightly more attainable than single detached or townhomes. So those uses are going to be allowed as of right. What that means is if an affordable housing project needs land or wants to make an application for funding, it doesn't need to go through a very long and tedious and expensive rezoning process. So that also saves them cost and time.
And so just as a follow-up to that, does that all come back in other public meetings when the next stage happens, or?
It will be discussed through secondary planning, subdivision planning, site planning. Whenever there is a public meeting in the works, people will get to know.
So there is a public meeting for those pieces?
Secondary planning, there's lots of public consultation.
Okay,
Yes.
just because I don't want it to appear as though
No.
like it's just a decision, a fait
No.
accompli, and suddenly there's going to be
No.
thing arising
Yeah.
without
Allow-
input.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about the pieces that were that had the high level of density on that slide 40, whatever it was. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. Is that the only area where high density is currently on the 12? Or is there going to be greater density, intensification, high-rise buildings, the potential for that in any of the other parcels of land?
I think the simple answer to that is that'll be there's potential through these zoning bylaws. However, it'll be vetted through the secondary plan process. So there is potential for higher density in some of these areas.
Okay. And then that, again, will come back to the community. There was one question around building more houses is one thing, but what the heck are you doing to attract good paying jobs to Caledon? I want to work close to home. I do not want to commute anymore. I know you had one slide, Eric, but I know economic development is part of your thing. Employment lands, what's happening?
So there, you get into that a little with, like we're getting a little outside of the land use planning sphere.
Yeah.
My economic development team is constantly out there working with industry or otherwise, they're looking to move to Caledon, looking to set up here. The team that I have is very proactive in, constantly engaging, going out to industry sessions, doing what we can to try to bring, business or otherwise. One of the big drivers of interest to locate in places like Caledon is a population base that would work for the industries or otherwise that are looking to locate here. So that's part of it's very much tied together where you need to provide the residential with the industry and employment uses to really attract them. So that's part of this is like by drawing people here, we're drawing more people of education or otherwise that would actually be able to work in the various jobs.
Okay. And the last one is on one of the slides you indicated it was related to amenities. So it had the number of schools, the number of community parks, the number of something called a neighborhood park or an amenity. We didn't describe what those were. So what's the difference between a community park and a neighborhood park? So there were 3 community parks and some 50 neighborhood parks. And then the follow-up was, can we put a cricket pitch into one of the community parks? Now we have a great parks and, just so everybody knows, there's a great Parks and Rec community input program where you can put that's the place for that, have your say Caledon. But I think the difference between the neighborhood park amenity and community park. What's the difference?
So neighborhood parks tend to be the immediate walk-to type parks. So they're the ones, most oftentimes it's within 400 meters of a household. So it's meant to service the immediate community. They're smaller in nature. They tend to include things like play structures, pathways, maybe some small recreational amenities, could be shade structures, et cetera. Community parks tend to be where you'd locate larger facilities like, soccer fields or cricket pitches. So that's primarily the difference. So we have fewer community parks, and they're meant to be not quite destinations, but they serve the larger area. You can't fit a soccer field in every local neighborhood park. Just the cost of providing the parks or otherwise would be too much. So we tend to centralize them in different locations and provide what's effectively required in different communities based on demand. So you tend to have more demand for play structures overall. So you provide them as close as you can to the residents. That can encourage walking or otherwise to the parks themselves.
Okay.
With respect to the cricket pitch, Bindu has an answer.
So we have a Parks and Rec master plan, which is in the draft stage. And we have been planning for a provision of a community-sized cricket pitch within that plan. It went to public and there was a lot of feedback. So we are working with a local group to develop a small neighborhood cricket pitch in the Mayfield West community. I'm unsure whether that is the actual one that was mentioned in the draft parks plan, but that's an initiative that's going on right now.
Okay, thank you. So this one's tied a little bit to that. Is the city, or I guess the town, planning to have more walkable neighborhoods? You touched on it a little bit with the neighborhood parks piece in future growth for the next 30 years, or is it going to end up like Brampton? Will these neighborhoods have transit hubs?
So the details for a lot of this kind of development comes out at the secondary plan level when you get down to the breakdown of where the land uses locate within a plan area. In general, I think from a high-level planning perspective, that's the goal of the municipality, is to see communities where people want to live, where it encourages them to step outside their car and walk through the community. So I think as a goal, that is something that we have going forward, but the details of which come much later. And there will be community input that will be taken into that, and it will be part of the planning process.
Okay, and the transit piece too, in that same?
The transit is more specifically tied to densities typically, but
Okay.
what the goal is, you connect your communities of density along with you connect them to employment or otherwise to ensure people have alternative options to travel to their work or other locations, to try to, once again, encourage people to, not require a car to move around. Requiring a car is part of the affordability problem that often comes with planning.
Okay, thank you. So this one is very current. Global News reported 2 weeks ago that in the GTA area, units that are currently already built are remaining empty. If there are about a 16 to 18-month backlog of empty units that are remaining unsold, then why are we expecting so much growth for Caledon? This feels like it's helping Doug Ford and developers, not our town.
Yeah, I think this could be common in larger urban centers, but in Caledon specifically, we don't have data that this is as prevalent. What we know for sure is that units that are approved are not being built in the time frames that we expect them to be built. So as Eric mentioned, there's 3,000 units currently not even built after being approved. So that is what we know for sure. We don't have data on the other piece.
So then our issue, if I'm hearing you correctly, is different than the highly dense urban areas in that we're not getting approved spots, sorry, I'm using the wrong words because I'm not a planner. The approved parcels or the approved opportunities are not proceeding, so the units aren't even built to become empty. Is that what you're saying?
This is a tough one. So this is the first, I don't think, I haven't heard this about happening in Caledon. I'm actually surprised this is something that's happening because in my whole career in planning, it's effectively a myth that things are kept vacant. Occasionally it comes down to speculation. You have investors purchasing units and otherwise, not wanting to rent them out when that could be related to, sort of provincial policies with respect to rental registration or otherwise. So there's no doubt that some of this happens, whether some of it's, again, for speculation or otherwise. I'm fairly new to Caledon. That's not something that I've heard as being an issue. It's something I do want to check back, see if we're having that issue. There are other things that municipalities use to discourage this. City of Hamilton, as an example, recently passed a vacancy tax. So if units are vacant, you get taxed at a higher rate. It's a potential revenue opportunity or a way to actually, encourage people to start occupying units. Again, because a lot of our development hasn't been some of the high density residential, which I'm guessing is where a lot of that market impact is. It's probably not the same issue here, but again, like Bindu indicates, we don't have data of that. So that's something how do you respond to something that we don't actually know is occurring?
Okay. So we're going to finish with, I have two more, and then we're going to move to questions on the mic from members of the crowd who have additional questions based on what they've seen in the presentation. So this one is a community safety question. I'm not sure we have an answer to this because it's not related to the plots itself. So if we don't have an answer, we're going to have to come back. It is Old School and Heart Lake Road area. There have been 5 accidents just in the last year by cars, 2 of them proving fatal. What steps is the town taking to make the area and our roads safer?
We happen to have another one of our senior leadership in town.
We do.
We have Rita. Perhaps Rita can help us out in this one.
Rita is our acting commissioner in engineering, roads, and public works. I hope I got your title right.
You did, thank
Okay.
you. Hi, everybody, and thanks for the question. There are a number of things that we do to, one, evaluate, characterize the impact of the traffic, the speeds, and we work with community partners, including Peel Police, to try to help us, one, better understand the behavior, enforce speed, and try to develop a safer plan in the future. I can't speak to that one specifically, but it certainly is on the community's radar as it is on our radar. Unfortunately, Arash Olia is not here, but some of you might know him. He's diligent and always sort of working on, one, taking the pulse of the issues in the community with respect to safety, and then working with our community partners to make sure that we put together a plan that makes sense for everybody and keeps everyone safe.
Thank you. And the last one that we have from the cards and inbound questions. We already suffer from a lack of, and it's tied a little bit to what you've talked about, but consolidates in a different way. We already suffer from a lack of roads, schools, and community centers. How do you plan to build new houses without planning the local on current infrastructure? The analytics you are relying on are from 10 years old analyses and do not correspond to reality. It's a bit of a hot potato.
It's a technical question. It has financial elements. It has elements that go beyond the town of Caledon, reflect, it's the Region of Peel School Board or the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board with respect to schools. What we do is, what we're looking at right here and right now is population projection and growth. And typically with population, there are certain requirements for parkland. There are so many people typically per hectare of parkland. Parkland is usually provided either both by distance and by population basis, as an example. Fire stations would be the same thing. So there's both a geographic and a population-based element that goes into the provision of fire stations. Elementary and high school, same kind of thing, mostly geographic. But again, so it's a reaction, oftentimes it's a reaction, and the design of this comes through the draft plans, they come through the secondary planning process. So what happens is a lot of these things are years away from coming because the actual development is years away from coming. So it's part of the early plans which allow, whether it's our school boards or the municipality, to start budgeting for this going forward. So it's a natural part of growth, is that you provide these additional services.
Thank you. Ali, we're going to start with questions from the crowd, and the gentleman in the green shirt had his hand up, waving furiously. First.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, so the last question was from me. So the information, what I'm talking about, right? So when I do analysis, right, and I'm working as data analytic as well, right? So I open like A2 analysis for traffic, and you relate to information from 2017 or 15, right? So there's no traffic in this area. And based on this information you relate, so it's how it works. I just try to understand. Can you provide
So
more
in
information?
terms of please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's about how might we be able to anticipate and forecast if all we have are actuals from 5, 6, 7,
10.
8 years old? How do we forecast based on anticipated need if we're using numbers that are based on a smaller population?
Correct.
Thank you.
So again, this gets down to, when you get down to the detailed secondary plans or otherwise, this is what we're doing. You start to get into that, you require traffic modeling. It's constantly part of the process, and it updates with additional numbers, which you can do. I'm not a traffic analyst. This might even be better for Rita than I. But in terms of the population numbers, it has a direct correlation. And so the gentleman is right, very much right, that 2017 data probably will need an update.
Okay.
And now that would have been related to that specific application. There's still a process that we have to go through for A2, just like all the other applications.
Rita, could you take an attempt at how traffic forecasting actually works? Because you're the engineer in the room.
I'm the engineer in the room, but not the traffic expert, but I will take a stab at it. So essentially, you're right, the traffic numbers from the past don't necessarily predict the future. We're looking at the population coming into that community, we're talking about densities, we're evaluating it on our proposed collector road network, we're looking at the local traffic within a secondary plan and saying, okay, where is that movement going to go? What are the peak hours in the morning, in the evening, and designing accordingly. I hope that helps answer the question.
Ali, Nicola had her, sorry, Karen, she's going to hand the mic to the end of the row.
Okay, thank you. I'm Karen Hutchinson, and I'm curious about the financial piece. I think that you put up the revenue, but you didn't put up the expenses. And so does the new tax revenue cover the operation of all of the community infrastructure proposed? So does the tax base support all of the additional expenditures? Because you showed us the revenue, but not the expenditures. And then to follow up on that, also with the infrastructure, I know that the Region of Peel said at the very late meeting that they were already in debt on infrastructure provision. So $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but is it really to cover all of the infrastructure requirements? So that's all around the financial piece.
If I may, yeah, great questions. Yes, tax levy is in place to support new infrastructure that goes in place as the growth develops. Is it a perfect science? No, it's more of a craft. So as development comes in, you're not actually, you're building as you can, but if the growth and development doesn't come in, you're not building the infrastructure. Therefore, mainly because you don't have the development funds. So it kind of is that simple. Therefore, there's no tax base to actually support any new infrastructure. If growth accelerates, well, then you've actually collected more development charges, and hopefully you can catch up and put infrastructure in place in a timely manner and have residents move in and businesses move in to support that new infrastructure. Again, it's not a perfect science, but that is exactly the way the municipalities in Ontario do it. I can't speak to the Region of Peel too much, but I can tell you something about development charges in general. In some cases where you see a very bullish or aggressive growth plan, you may choose to front-end the development of new infrastructure into an area with the expectation of fast growth coming in which case your deficit in development charge reserve funds is a temporary deficit, and it gets caught up rather quickly. I can't speak to the Region of Peel. I know they have a couple cases where they accelerated some of their infrastructure. The other one I didn't mention up there, and it showed up on the slide, was education and schools. They have their own educational DCs that pay for new schools that come in, and they kind of have a little bit different because they have the Ministry of Education involved, and before they can build a new school, the ministry needs to say, yes, this school will be working in perpetuity in this community. So there's a couple of things there. Those are great questions. We're very confident in how they go together going forward. And $2 billion, that is the number right now for infrastructure going forward. And we're confident with those numbers. Now, the infrastructure that goes in the ground is priced out at that number and up of the ground as well. All the projects are listed in the appendices of the development charge background study on our website, and they're separated by roads, fire protection, bylaw, library, parks and rec. And you can go right in there and you see new library or Mayfield Library, et cetera, and community centers in there.
And then will the revenue, what is the other side of that balance sheet? So there's the revenue forecast. What is the expenditure forecast of supporting those taxes?
They match. So what we're showing you is the revenue, and we can't operate a deficit, right? So it has to match, and that is the theory behind it. The other side of this, if we choose to put in infrastructure a little bit early and expend our development charge reserves a little bit early and go into a negative balance, we catch those up in the next development charge bylaw, which is fully recoverable from future development going forward. So the Act has really protected the municipalities and the existing residents of the municipality going forward, but it is quite complicated in terms of where the moving pieces are. But I can tell you that the expenditures in the study and the revenues in the study equal one another over the 10-year period.
I just want to add a kind of a question comment to that, although that's not my question. So our taxes aren't going to go up?
This is kind of unrelated to that question. Our tax is going to go up is related to numerous other factors. It's not going to go up because of development or this development per se. It will go up probably because of inflationary impacts on the variables that we have to pay for on a regular basis. Just the cost of materials, we've seen incredible inflation since 2020. And that's had a direct impact on our budgeting process going forward. So to say that taxes aren't going up, I doubt it. But I don't see them going up specific to the development.
At the April 25th, the long meeting, we talk about there were 2 burning questions for the night. I mean, there were many burning questions, but 2 in particular. One was, why was this process being moved so quickly? And it continues to be quick, although we don't know when the vote will be. So that question hasn't been asked, why it's being done so quickly. And the second question that was burning that night is, why not use normal planning processes? From everything I have read, heard, to put the rezoning before the secondary plans and all those other long lists that are always done before the zoning, which is at the end, is being turned around, and we have not had that addressed. So why not stick with a process that's tried and true, and so we know it's coming forward, and why the rush?
Why are we not, you're going to have me answer the why are we not sticking with a quote unquote normal planning process? I don't have the skills, so I can't.
So the speed.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the speed by which we're moving, I think the rationale why we set these meetings up quickly was because, you know, it was explained that we were missing information. The community needed to hear more. It was to get back out with those answers fast. So we're going out, I think I think we got to the slide. There's 4 community information sessions where we're having this provided.
That's not the question. Just
No. That was the speed. So
the speed is related to why the process. So that if you can answer the question on the why to Nicola's question about why aren't we using normal planning processes?
Since I asked the question, can I clarify the question?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. On the speed, the way it was set up in the first place was the minimum 20 days to approve the entire process for the biggest development application in Caledon and a very large one provincial-wide. I think, tell me if I'm incorrect on that. And we still don't know how long this is going to take, but normally it would take years to get to zoning. And now we're trying to do it after 1 community meeting and 4 public information sessions. So, yes.
Apologies for getting the question a little mixed up. So the speed is there. I think we explained it pretty well with the one slide. It's getting out there and showing, you know, industry or otherwise, getting us set up to respond to growth. What I think we heard from the community, whether it was at that meeting or not, is the speed was too fast. So that was acknowledged. That's been acknowledged by members of council, but also here in our presentations to the community today. So apologies for the speed.
And so what is the speed now? What's the time frame now?
I think the time frame depends on how these sessions proceed, the feedback that we get as we go through it, which establishes the speed by which we get back.
So it could be as soon as June the 11th.
So what would happen is we wouldn't write any report or otherwise until after we've had at least the opportunity to dive into community feedback. So our last community session is the 10th. So there's no way it would be the 11th. If you look at report turnaround times or otherwise, it wouldn't be that fast.
Well, you gave us 4 days the last time, or no staff report, and it was April 25th to April 30th.
Yep.
So what's changed now?
I think it's, again, we're out here listening. We'll absorb the feedback, and then we'll come back at some point to council.
And will we have
with a
staff reports
report.
and secondary plans before you make that vote?
Sorry, will we have?
Staff reports and secondary plans and tertiary plans where they're needed and environmental plans and all those other lists that you gave us. Will you have that before the rezoning vote?
rezonings are different from secondary planning process.
We know that. I'm saying that the rezoning, as I understand it, I'm not a planner, but everybody
And
tells me
that's-
that the rezoning comes at the end, not at the beginning. Why are you turning that around?
The rezonings can come at any point in a process. You can always go back and you can change zones at any point. That's under council's authority to change zoning.
Is it standard practice to do the rezoning before the secondary plans? The zoning, sorry, not the rezone.
It's whether it's standard or not, I can't speak to what's.
How
I don't
many
think
years of
been-
experience do you have, and how many times have you done the zoning before the secondary plan?
It's been done, like, I've actually done it a number of times now, coming from my past role, where you are ultimately identifying what you want to do before you've actually flagged what the specific details are. Oftentimes they'll use things like, it's called future growth nodes or otherwise identified, where effectively that's what this is. It's identifying lands that are going to proceed going forward.
So you've done
So hang on, just Nicolai, you've had a chance for a lot of questions, and I appreciate that. There's a lot of hands behind you.
I'm just waiting for an answer, that's all.
So there's a lot of hands behind you. If you can, there's a couple of people in the back row, if you don't mind, and then we'll sort. I'm sorry? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of hands way at the back. So we'll come to, so we've got 10 minutes left. So if you could try to keep the questions tight so that we can get responses to you. If you don't like them as answers, that's okay. But we'll respond to them and we'll try to get to everyone. If you can just show Allie where the hands are so that we can try to move through. So we've got at least 5 more.
Thank you. My name is John Rutter, and I live in Terracotta. I'm a very, very loving, passionate dog owner. And going back to your slide about the infrastructure proposals, I would just like to put a plug in for my dogs and other people's dogs, because they can't speak for themselves, about including leash-free parks in your parks. And I know amenities cover a lot of topics, but I would like to see leash-free parks, because they're very, very often ignored, included in your infrastructure proposals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tony Burkish. Is it on?
Just put it close to your
I
mouth.
live,
yeah.
I live in the area. Again, it was about this rush about getting everything done in a hurry. You did touch on what I had asked before, but Global News did come out with a statement saying that there is 18 months, 16 to 18 months of empty units, not sold, but empty units that is sitting out on the market, so much so that first quarter, 85% of developments have stopped because of this glutton of empty homes on the market. So again, this sounds really more like a Doug Ford push to bring in developers to develop all of our stuff and cause urban sprawl. I don't see a reason for it if there's so much empty units on the market. So can we please stop pushing so fast to develop so much when it's not even required realistically? These are just numbers that the government keeps putting out, but if you listen to the news and what's going on today, we have a lot of empty space. So please stop pushing all of these numbers. They're
Thank
not
you.
realistic.
We don't have the ability to influence the Ford government, so I appreciate that. And we can have the next question.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Merkley. I would like to address my first question to Mayor Groves. I believe you're still here. Mayor Groves, do you believe this plan is a very good plan for Caledon? It's a yes or no answer.
Well, I don't think a yes or no is a fair answer, Jerry.
Well, I think it's a very easy question.
Well,
Do you believe this plan is a very good plan for Caledon?
It is not a yes or no question, so I'm going to answer not just yes or no. As we saw earlier, we have a mandate from the provincial.
And I'm also cognizant of the time and other people.
Okay, and I'm answering the question. You asked the question, I'm giving you an answer.
Yes or
No,
no?
I am not answering. It's not a yes or no question, Debbie. Well, I'm not answering yes or no because it's not a yes or no question, and you're wasting time on the clock repeating myself. So we have a mandate from the province to take 220,000 people by 2051. We heard from the planners, it takes time. So doing a rezoning of a property or properties is not going to happen overnight. It is most likely anywhere but a 10-year process when you get through all the steps that you have to get through. So taking 35,000 units, that's half. We normally plan every 10 years. This time around, the province said, because there's a housing crisis, we're doing 20-year planning.
Okay,
So we're looking at doing
thank
a
you.
20-year plan.
Thank you, Annette, for the non-answer, frankly. If this is a necessary plan, and it is important and deemed to be a good plan, then why is it necessary to use strong mayor powers to proceed with this plan?
Using the strong mayor power, it is still a vote of council. All of council has an opportunity to vote on this application and this rezoning. So whether you use strong mayors or not, you still have an opportunity. The difference is, it's strong mayors, you need 1/3 or you need 4.
My question is why use this process as opposed to
We're
the
trying
full
to take a
council?
very proactive approach to development, and we talked about being proactive so that you can include. Yesterday, we had a presentation on green development standard. We had delegations from a number of people, students, Caledon, physicians, talking about including green development standards in your development. So
that's a
taking
tangent.
a proactive approach to development is what we need to do.
So you are answering that by saying you believe strong mayor powers is required to take
Again.
a proactive approach.
Again,
Okay.
it's a decision of council. Council has an opportunity to vote on this.
No, it's not.
Yes, they do.
I keep hearing a lot about secondary plans and the importance and how this will be all-inclusive, and there's a ton of elements that go into this, like the water, environment, transportation. I keep hearing this secondary plan. And the important thing about a secondary plan is the sequence in which it is analyzed and brought forth for careful consideration and excellence in planning. So my question, and it still has not been answered by everyone, including all of the delegates on April 25th, which I presume all of those questions, since they are recorded, will be answered and provided according to what you've said tonight. But because this secondary plan is so important, why are you changing the sequence and putting the zoning ahead of it? We just don't have a clear answer as to why you are pushing forward with this when the secondary plans are going to take just as much time. If you are saving approximately 1 to 1.5 years, which I've read from your own notes, then you are only increasing the timeline by 3.7% on this project out to 2051. Is that worth the risk of not doing proper secondary plans? We just don't have clarity or a good rationale for this at all.
So the zoning that's being put in there is identifying priority, it's identifying the direction Caledon is moving forward. There's holding zones put on top of those, so while they might have a residential zoning, it's effectively identifying this is what's happening, and this is how Caledon is proceeding forward. Secondary planning will be done before the holding gets lifted. Sorry, it's not.
We're going to hang on. We just can't. We don't have you on mic. So, Debbie, we don't have you on mic. So it's not going to be recorded for the video. So we have you on the list for a question, and I think Cheryl's behind. Someone's behind you. Sorry, I don't know your name. In pink, and the fellow in the brown coat. So we're going to go those three and extend to be able to get all three of you in.
Awesome. I'll be very quick. Hi, my name is Brad Merkley, and just a quick question. The presentation today was fairly long, and it seems like we all have still quite a few questions. Is there any chance that we could pre-record these presentations, post them online, and the rest of the sessions we host for 2 hours for questions? That's all. Can we consider that? Like, it just makes sense, no?
We're definitely taking input. We have three other communities to go to who have not received the information. We cannot assume that everyone has seen all of the content. And while some people already have information, lots of people have said, you're boring us, we've got this already. There are people who don't, and we need to be inclusive as much as possible. So,
well, that's... I don't know about that. I agree giving information is good, but it just seems like a lot of the information, including the plans, are posted on the website. Mm-hmm. And we're always told to refer to the website regarding these plans. So why can't we do the same with the information which is being disseminated through that portal to the town of Caledon, which we're told to refer to? Why can't we just do that in advance and inform the population?
We're going to put it up. I've been in the business a long time. I would love if every person in a community read everything on the website. And I'm not being facetious, but as much as we tell people, they don't. So we need to provide it. So we're going to do that. We're going to take your information, but we have 2 more people to get through, if you wouldn't mind, so that we could, and then we're out of time. So the woman in the pink coat, and then Debbie.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Connors. I have lots and lots of questions, so I'm going to try to stick to one. But this is insufficient for public input because we do have so many questions. In the Region of Peel letters, and I know you've explained to us that I'm not a planner, so I can't understand the letters, but the pointer was good enough to put the letters on their website, so I have read them. And there was a part that did concern me, and I guess because I'm not a planner, that's why I'm concerned. But this is what it said. Servicing constraints. A significant concern of the regions is that there is insufficient capacity in the regional water and wastewater system from our plants to more local means to accommodate the proposed community at this time, pending completion of the ongoing water and wastewater servicing master plan and approved capital projects as identified in the approved water and wastewater capital budget. Significant upgrades and additional water mains and sanitary sewers are required to service this community, both in the local vicinity of the development and within the entire water and wastewater system. These projects include expansions of water treatment plants, new water transmission pipelines, upgrades and expansions to water pumping facilities and reservoirs, new large sanitary conveyance pipelines and wastewater treatment facilities. The majority of these will require multi-year design and construction efforts to complete. The region currently estimates that the service upgrades and extensions are estimated to cost over $6.2 billion for water and $6.7 billion for wastewater for the housing pledges alone. Now, I know I'm not a planner, and this is much too complicated for me to understand. But as a taxpayer, and I did a little math on that, if we have, I don't know, maybe 25,000 households, that's over $500,000 each of us would have to pay in taxes. And I'm going to tell you right now, I can't afford it.
Hi.
Sorry, I just want to make sure you said, is there a question in there?
That's my question. Who's paying for that? Because that wasn't covered in $2 billion in taxes when we were told this was revenue neutral. that is not revenue neutral, but I don't know, I'm not an
Robert,
accountant either.
can you?
So I guess I can't understand it, the math.
I can speak in generalities. Water and wastewater is a regional service, so regional development charges would take care of the installation of new infrastructure to service growth-related areas. So whatever that price tag is, yeah, that's probably the cost of putting in new water treatment plants, new pipes, new transfer stations, et cetera. So if you looked at their development charge background study, you would see the projects that support that going forward. But it is a regional service.
We pay regional taxes in the town of Caledon as well. And just 4 of those applications are pre-application, right? So residents haven't been told anything. I went to the website to try to look at it for one, the monstrous apartment buildings in Caledon, because I wanted to see the financials on it. There is nothing about how water and wastewater is going to that complex. There's nothing on the website. There's no plans there. There is a revenue neutral, 2-page financial budget. The lack of information on this is astonishing. And I assure you that the people in Caledon understand why this is being rushed through, what this is about, because once the zoning is approved on all this land, these special friend developers are going to be gifted with monstrous increases in the price of the development. We understand what's going on here.
Woohoo! I don't know how you follow that. So I don't want to make a speech, but each of these zoning bylaw amendments, all of these things, they each require their own public meeting. For us to, those pictures up there, to be able to read them, to understand them, was ridiculous. Ridiculous. These maps here, ridiculous. So we are asking that, number one, you stop this pre-zoning period. It does not make sense. Victor Doyle has looked at this, and Eric, God bless you, but what you are saying does not ring true with trued and planners that we know, that this does not make sense. I'm going to ask a question. You mentioned that the Region of Peel has identified several that are outside of the 2051 new urban boundary, and that changes have been made to those zoning bylaws. Could you show me, please, where they are? We have a pledge that said 2031, we've got lands for 2041, and now we've got lands for 2051, and we've got lands beyond 2051. So these are the kinds of details that I think we deserve to understand before a vote takes place on this. So we're asking to stop this, halt this, go back to a tried and true. You have not answered why this is necessary. It has not been answered. So, could we please have individual public meetings where boards where people can sit around and actually look at these before you proceed forward?
Thank you, Debbie. We don't have an answer for you on that today. We have 2. I'm being honest. What did you want me to say? Yes, because I don't have authority to do that. So we'll take it away, and thank you. We have 2 people who had their hands up. We are at 9:30. Asking you if we can go for 2 more questions and then call it a night. So the gentleman over here with his hand up.
Thank you. My name is Al Axworthy, and I just wanted to add to what Cheryl said about that, the region's estimates on water servicing and wastewater servicing. That total of $12.9 billion is just for the 13,000 housing units. So it only relates to what the pledge covers. So, you can only imagine what it's going to be to do 35,000 homes. So that was one thing. And the other question I had that kind of got asked earlier, but unofficially got asked, was with strong mayor powers, can holding symbols be removed?
No. No. I'll take your questions actually on the infrastructure piece. I was a former chair of Public Works at the region. But with respect to the holding symbol, strong mayor power cannot remove the H. That H has to be removed by council as a whole. And Stephen Dixon is here. He's our solicitor. And Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe strong mayors can remove the H.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It's something we haven't examined, but it's not anticipated, and I believe we're here and it will not be utilized.
So can I speak to the infrastructure piece, Al? And you're absolutely right. So the region has been in a shortfall with infrastructure, and we've had to postpone some projects. And at that time, and this is prior to Bill 23, at that time I think we were about $1.2 billion short. We've certainly increased that now. And one of the things that the region has done over the years, and the region has a 10-year capital plan, and they even go beyond. So they look at all 3 municipalities where growth is going to occur in all 3 municipalities. They've mapped it out to see where the pipes are, and they have it in their 10-year capital plan. One of the things that the region has been doing over the years, because we looked at it and say, we just don't have the dollars for infrastructure. You've got Brampton, Mississauga there as well, is the region started to look at other ways of funding the infrastructure. So as Mr. Cummins said earlier, they're looking at front-ending the cost of the infrastructure. And the developers have more money most times than the regions or the municipalities. So we're saying to the developers, well, then you pay for the infrastructure up front, you front-end it, and we can credit you through the development charges. That is something that is allowed under the Development Charges Act. Mr. Cummings, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not an expert on the DC Act, but that is something that you can do. We also use the same thing for road infrastructure. And I'll give you an example. There is a road in Bolton, and that plan was approved over 20 years ago. It's in our industrial area. The town did not and still does not have the money to build that road. The developers in that area, they are front-ending that cost, and so they will be building the road for us, and we will be crediting them through what we call an area-specific development charge and our development credit. And that's the same thing that the region is doing with water and wastewater. We should also mention that, and I mean, I'm not going to divulge confidential information because this conversation around the region appeal and some of the services that are being looked at of being downloaded from the region, water and wastewater, it's one of those services. Now the province has made it very clear that they will be making municipalities whole, and we are holding the province to that, to tell us, how are you going to make us whole? What exactly are you going to do with water and wastewater? One of the things that the province and the minister has said that, and I know that he was quoted in the newspaper, that that will not be on the backs of the taxpayers. And so right now, the province is looking at what they are going to do with water and wastewater. I'll also remind you that Mississauga pays 60% of that bill at the region. We pay 5%. Brampton pays the rest, the 35%. So right now, the region has their 10-year capital plan, and they are looking at other ways of funding infrastructure. And again, we don't know where water and wastewater is going to end up. Is it going to be at the province, or is it going to be in more of a utility-style board? We don't know. But we continue to work with the region. The region has been involved with this right from the beginning. I hope that answers.
Thank you. We have one last question, the gentleman in the orange shirt. Sorry, it's red.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Russo, we're here again, right? Yeah, we're past the time. By my count, there has to be at least 7 or 8 senior staff here from the town. I have 2 points to make. Hopefully you take these as constructive criticism. I've had the good fortune of presenting to massive audiences. I've had the good fortune of being trained in PowerPoint presentations. In what world did you guys think it was a good idea to put 80 slides in this presentation and cram that amount of information in 2 hours? With all due respect, that's a big F. And that's not the first in this process. The 7 or 8 senior staff that are here, I do not recall any of them at that meeting on that Thursday night that went to 2 o'clock. They certainly weren't in chambers. I did not see any of them. And another big F, I don't think you did a good job of relaying what our concerns were and answering those concerns. And this is not a forum to do that. We are asking for the opportunity to question and input. We spent 75% of the time that you allotted hearing anonymous questions and listening to, again, with all due respect, it is not the presenter that I'm picking on. That was a big so what that you presented. It was, there was nothing that is tangible, that's of value, that explains why we are changing the process. You guys, we're just asking 2 really simple questions, and my colleagues here have already explained those questions, and yet there are, you guys twist yourself into pretzels to try and answer them, or you jam in information that no human can take all this information and process it, read it, understand it, let alone see it on the friggin' screen. Why are you guys hiding this? Like something doesn't add up. We're not against development. I get it. Bring development. We need houses. You're never going to build affordable houses in Caledon. You guys are way off the base if you believe that that is what is going to happen. I don't know if any of the senior staff live in Caledon. Are you prepared to take a 40, 50% cut in your house so you can make it affordable and somebody can buy it? I highly doubt it. $12.9 billion. Sure, it's going to go to the region. We pay regional taxes. Oh yeah, the government of Ontario, they're going to cover the cost. We pay Ontario taxes. It's all going to come down to us. We're going to pay it. We want a say. We want you guys to be open and transparent, and I just don't believe for a moment that that is happening. How can we have trust in this government, in this council, in the staff, when this process, how it has been laid out? It's mind-boggling. You guys are talking and saying all the right things, but your actions are nowhere near what you're talking. So I just want you guys to do the right thing. And this isn't the right thing. These aren't the right things. Development's coming. We'll take development, but just do it the right way. We have a tried and true and proven process. We don't need strong mayor powers. You know, what we need is a strong leader, one who can bring the council together. We need each councillor to have their opportunity to say their vote. We need the councillors to be independent board directors. It's quite simple. democracy is ugly, but it's simple, and it's the best that we have. And strong mayor powers is not a democracy. And this is not a democracy, okay? You guys have failed 2 in a row now. In Albion, unfortunately, I'll be away. Alton, unfortunately, I'll be away, but I'll be there on the 10th. I hope you guys take some of this to heart and have a completely different approach for the folks in Bolton. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, your patience with a slow start, your questions, your input, your disagreement. And we will take your feedback. We have a bunch of questions written down. We will have the full video to be able to not only put on the web, but to go through and analyze and take down the questions. And we will work to make some revisions for the next meeting. I cannot make a guarantee it's going to be 180 degrees from where it is right now. We are taking the input and we will be building it in. Thank you.